Well, it's 2026. Happy New Year. We got firings, we got hirings, at least one coach hired already, and we got a resignation, right? The Steelers are losing Mike Tomlin. He is walking off into the pasture. He's saying, I don't want to do this right now anymore. 19 years as a head coach, 53 years old. Maybe he'll be back. Probably will be back, unless he's just done with football. There's a little bit of talk. Maybe he goes into the TV sphere about it. And listen, at 19 years of being the head coach, that's a long time, missing out a lot of what your family's been up to. That's a lot of time away from your family. And I do not knock him for wanting to kind of get to spend time with the people who are important with him in his life. He has dedicated a huge chunk of his life to the sport. I'm assuming his entire life, and that you're at 53 years old, there is going to be a moment there where you're going to be like, hey, you know what? I want to see things. I want to take a break. And so he is taking a break, at least for now. It could be permanent, could be temporary. The Steelers, though, right? That was not a vacancy we were expecting. We heard some rumors, according to Josina Anderson, like a month or so ago. There might be a coach that's looking to step away from the game. Now we look at the Steelers here. 10th in cap space, 9th in cap space with $65 million. They have the 21st overall pick in the draft. Don't really know what they're going to do with the quarterback. They do have a good owner. Like, they have an owner that is very well respected in the league, maybe considered one of the most respected owners in the league. A GM that a lot of people have a lot of appreciation for. The issue is they have no quarterback. They have a defense that's aging, and they're kind of losing a lot of talent. They do have some young guys there on the back end, as far as Porter goes and Elliott, but it does feel like a team that's kind of in a transition mode. Yes, you got Watt. Watt's always going to be good. You got to bring in probably somebody to make sure that you build up this team again. And I'm not sure how quickly Rooney's going to jump off as somebody if it doesn't work. You got to realize it's been a long time since Rooney's had to go to a new coach. They have a process involved, I'm sure. I'm very curious about how this plays out for the Steelers. Normally, you would say they are the kind of like, that's the organization you would want to go to, right? I get to go to the Steelers. They're going to give me the time. They're going to do what I need to do. But they're a team that tends to not be very cash heavy in their deals. So they're not very aggressive on the free agency markets. A lot of draft and develop dudes. So I'm very curious about how they handle stuff going forward. I could see them as maybe a Brian Flores team, as like a sneaky one to kind of bring in Brian Flores or a Robert Saleh, if you will. And I think probably defensive, leaning coach, but maybe not. Maybe they're exciting. Maybe they go ahead and they go offensive. Maybe they go Kubiak here. They're probably going to lose Arthur Smith to a head coaching job this year. If not, if he does walk away. It depends on who they hire to stay. If they hire in-house, maybe it goes a different direction with that. But I don't know. I look at the Steelers as a weird thing because it's, this was a team that, for the longest time, this was a team that's top dog. They're in the playoffs. They're in the playoffs. They lost their first game in the playoffs, so they're out, but they were in the playoffs. And so you have a team that is got this storied history, 19 years of the same coach who, never had a losing season, and now he's stepping away. And how do you keep it going with no quarterback? And now no longer the guy who kind of kept you in it. Now, Rodgers, it doesn't sound like Rodgers is coming back. I think Rodgers was very much tied to Tomlin. When Tomlin stepped away, I think that means Rodgers is probably not for the Steelers any longer. So now I think they have to figure out what's their future at quarterback, future at head coach. What's the future direction of this team? I don't know. I don't know if I'm a head coach looking for a job, this is the best job. I know it's probably the best ownership situation of all of them, right? Because you don't see very much turnover there. I'd be curious if maybe they were in on the Stefanski sweepstakes, because I don't think it's really much of a sweepstakes. I know but they're very familiar with him. Obviously, seeing him in Cleveland, seeing what went on when he had Baker and Watson and all, and making it to the playoffs, a 2-time Coach of the Year candidate. So we'll talk a little bit about him more when we get to both the Browns, and then when I get to kind of predicting where I see a lot of these guys going. So I will eventually talk about the Giants and their hiring of Mr. John Harbaugh, but I don't know if they're on the list next. So Miami Dolphins, right? They kind of came a little bit late to the coaching search. Early, they weren't the last ones, to be honest. They were originally going to keep Mike McDaniel. They were looking for a new GM. They did hire a new GM in John Eric Sullivan. And it sounds like they're in this process of, I guess they're redoing the team. I don't know if Tua is going to be there for much longer. It sounded like going into this offseason that it was going to be a competition for the quarterback there, even if McDaniel was still there. McDaniel's out. Now he's going to be interviewing for offensive coordinator and even head coaching gigs around the league. I think he's going to be a very hot candidate. We do have a few OC openings for teams that already have established head coaches. There will also be teams that are looking for new OCs that are hiring coaches as well. So, the Dolphins are a weird one because they just don't seem like a very. It's funny because they had McDaniel there for the last few years. Before him, you had Flores. Like they didn't like just give up on guys. So if you're a guy who's looking for like a team to go to as a head coach that maybe he's like an up and comer, but they did eject Flores after having him be kind of the cheerleader of the rebuild. Now they have pick 11 in this draft. Are they going to try and do another rebuild? I don't know. I don't know if this is really that great of a spot. I think you might see a defensive coach come here. Jesse Minter, who's got an interview with, I feel like every team this offseason for head coach. Is this a Vance Joseph spot? I know he's doing a lot of interviews. I believe there was the defensive coordinator for the Packers, Halsey. Not the singer, obviously. Although she might. You know what? I think that's a plan here, right? Miami, go ahead, hire Halsey, the singer. I think you would definitely be on track for a good pick in the draft, at least, right? I mean, I don't know how much. Maybe she is an offensive mastermind. You know what, Miami, go hire Halsey. Do it. I'm begging you. The problem is they have pick 11 in the draft. They probably need a new QB. I don't think they're sticking with Tua. He's got a lot of the injury concerns, and then also, I mean, just this year, the guy who made you look good couldn't make you look good anymore, and you lost I don't even know if Tyreek's going to be back there either. They have Jalen Waddle. I think he's going to be a key part of the rebuild, the key focus of that offense, whatever new offense they run there going forward. So you have a wide receiver one, which is a hard thing to come by nowadays. They have cap space issues. They're $21 million estimated to be over the cap. I don't think it's as much of a concern, but I think you might start seeing some jettisoning of talent, of contracts, of moving on from dudes. It's a team that really, I think they were starting to look a little bit better by the end of the year. They were getting competitive again. That's why I think McDaniel was initially going to be the return guy. I think they looked at it and they said, well, I think they were waiting to see what the deal was with any of the new GM candidates who they were interviewing. Once they made a decision, I think the decision was, hey, you guys want to pick your own guy? Fine. We'll bring in a new guy to set us up for the future. You don't have to be locked in with Mike McDaniel for a year. And that's understandable as well. I just think maybe you should have just then outed him out a week ago and given him some time. Instead of him sitting there and being in charge of the exit interviews and all that stuff. You could have been kind of a little bit better set, I felt like, and already had a jump start on this process of interviewing people, although they didn't wait too late. I also think Jim Harbaugh definitely played a role in that. I think a lot of teams want Jim Harbaugh. I think maybe the Dolphins looked at it as like, listen, the risk of missing out on Jim Harbaugh, and we never even tried. Now they're going to lose out on him anyway, it sounds like. Sounds like the Giants are getting John! God damn it, John! Walter, it's John. You should know that. So John Harbaugh, probably going to the Giants. Dolphins, I think I don't know if I really like the situation a lot. You got an owner who, has meddled quite a bit over time, stepped out, kind of, they finally got rid of Greer finally, but, and we don't know anything about the new GM, Sullivan. We know he was with the Packers. Don't know how particularly, what his role was there as much as far as, how much input he had and everything, but clearly comes highly recommended. Is that a team that I would want to mimic? Maybe. Like, I'm sure everybody wants to mimic these teams that make it to the playoffs and get a Super Bowl and get all the, get far every year. I'm curious to see, what direction he wants to take this franchise in going forward. Let's talk a little bit about the Titans, right? They got the 4th pick in the draft. They fired Brian Callahan during the season. The good things, right? A lot of cap space. Second in cap space, $96 million, $95 million in cap space. Can clear more if they move off of Calvin Ridley and L'Jarius Sneed. I don't know if that's necessarily in the cards for them, but it could be. The other question you got to wonder is how do you feel about Cam Ward in year 2? It sounds like the rumor is right now a lot of teams are interested in it. Like a lot of the head coaches are interested in him. The candidates are finding him intriguing. I don't know. I think there's some signs of life to him. I'm sure if you bring in a guy who is a good offensive guru, who has been used to dealing with developing quarterbacks, yeah, I think there is possibilities there. I know they talked to a lot of former head coaches, right? Brian Daboll, Matt Nagy, anybody who is a prior head coach, they try to go ahead and lock up at least one interview with them. Stefanski, I think they even had Spags and Lou. I think Coach Spags they brought in. The McDaniel they brought in already, I think, or were interviewing McDaniel at some point. So they definitely have a lot of they seem to be leaning towards a coach with head coaching experience. I think they looked at how Brian Callahan handled things. They were not big fans of how he handled stuff. Obviously, he didn't even make it to the end of year 2. The owner here, very mercurial, I would say. I think a lot of people feel very mixed on this ownership group. And because there's been turnover at that GM position quite a bit over the last few years. I think they're on the third GM in like 6-7 years. Feels like somebody's always getting fired there, right? Whether it's a coach or GM or this. The defense was, 28th in DVOA and points and yards. But I think they have pieces in Sweat and Stewart and Joseph Day. They were better earlier in the season than they were late in the season. They have a high draft pick, like top 4 pick, so maybe they could bulk up a little bit on that. It does, the wide receivers here are not great, right? I think Calvin Ridley's the best one, and the injury from him didn't get help, and he's getting old, and, never really kind of clicked with Cam Ward entirely, so... Mike Borgonzi, right? How do people feel about him around the league is going to be a big question. Is he going to find his guy to come in here and do stuff? They do have a couple of free agents. I will say this. The offensive line definitely was trending better by the end of the year. They are losing Zeitler to free agency. He's older, so he probably shouldn't be a hard re-signing. If he even wants to come back, he might retire. But, the offensive line started looking a little bit better going into this with guys like Latham and Skoronski started, kind of popping up. The free agent from last year, Moore, was probably one of the weaker links on the line as well, but I mean at least a little bit better than what they were dealing with last year. And then Cush is maybe the weakest link on the line, the center. Maybe they trade him, maybe they cut him, they find somebody new. But I do think their offensive line at least looks like it has some good pieces to build around now. And you had a rookie quarterback here, and I think this team never really felt like it had the pieces to have the horses to keep moving forward. I just never believed in it. They got a lot of money, so if there's any free agents they feel very particular about, and I'll do a free agency preview down the line, but this is more about the head coaches and their palatability to the head coach firings and the palatability of these teams for the new hires. I think the palatability here, if I'm a head coach, I'm probably leaning away from the Titans, unless this is like, hey, you're never going to get another option here. Go ahead and take this gig. There's going to be people like that, and they're going to have to come in and figure this all out. So I think the Titans, not my favorite team to have to go work for if I was a coach, but I digress. Let's see here. We got next is the Giants, right? Now we don't have to worry about figuring out who the Giants are hiring. It sounds like it's going to be Mr. John Harbaugh, former Ravens head coach. Listen, their last coach lasted 4 years. The 3 coaches before them each at least had 2 years to run. So it did feel like they pulled the plug on those guys about the right time. Kind of seems reasonable after 2 years if you don't see a lot of growth. Daboll lasted 4 years. They might have a QB. Dart looked pretty good. Dart looked better than how Caleb Williams looked last year. So The issue is he does like running headfirst into contact. I think that's what got Daboll fired, right? At a certain point, Daboll was no longer coaching for the players and their development. He was coaching for his job. He got reckless with how he was treating Dart. Dart, he was not coaching him out of, inviting contact, and you can't have that. You just can't. Like, you can't be a good head coach and let your player take that level of risk and not try to coach it out of him, not try to convince him to stop doing it. And we heard very public praise for the how dangerous he was with that. And I think that's kind of what I'm a little concerned by. You got to coach that stuff out. Listen, there were some good things that we see from this team though, right? The defensive front should have probably been better actually than it was, and I mean I would think actually I would make the argument that their commitment to the defensive coordinator is probably also what got Daboll fired. That's why they started losing games really quickly. Is that what was it? Shane Bowen was the defensive coordinator there. He was terrible. Their commitment to Shane Bowen was a terrible move. I think that's. If you look at the last 4 years of Daboll's career, his commitment to Shane Bowen the last year or two, it just was not good, and he should have moved off him way sooner. He made a lot of mistakes with that. Just terrible. They lost games because of Bowen and how he was calling those defenses, and the fact that they just didn't pull the plug on him soon enough. They got a lot of good pieces. They got a lot of good defensive guys, but man, that was sad. They also offensively have a lot of cool pieces, right? You still have Andrew Thomas there. I think you have the two tackles. Illuminor, you got to re-sign, bring him back. You got Andrew Thomas. Those are bookends, but they're very good bookends. The middle's got to be punched up a little bit, I'm thinking. Move off of Runyon and add a new guard here or there. But you look at that interior trio, you just got to keep developing and putting guys in that spot. I think once you have the tackles, though, I think you're in a good spot. So Illuminor, get him re-signed and in the building. Keep him there. And offensively, you have Neighbors. He's coming off the ACL. Don't know how quick he's going to be back. At the track that we're kind of looking at here with the ACL and meniscus, maybe he's back by the beginning of the season. Maybe it takes him a month or so to get warmed into everything. He is a high-quality athlete, but, it does sound like even from his own words, he's not entirely sure he's going to start the season. Scadaboo looked good. Scadaboo also had a massive injury also during the season. So there's a lot of concerns, but a lot of cool things, a lot of good pieces here. Did I have the money on this? Significant free agents. They don't have a lot in cap, right? They can make some cap, move off of James Hudson, Runyon. That'll clear some cap out for them. Bobby Okereke they can move off of if they want to. They don't have to. Roy Robertson Harris would clear up about a couple million of space. They could trade Kayvon Thibodeau. I don't know if they want to do that. They want to keep that piece in there. Don't know. But they can get some space, and then that's not even with restructures and stuff with all the guys there too. They have some money to play around with. The receivers outside of Neighbors are a mess, and they have to address that situation, I think. This free agency, draft, both, I don't care. They got to fix that situation. And it's going to get worse because they're also losing, I think, Wan'Dale Robinson to free agency too. So, I look at Illuminor should be a priority re-signing. Schlotman played 300 snaps at center. I thought he was actually playing, pretty decently. Maybe get him back. Van Roten's not going to cost you anything if you want to bring him back, I don't think. Belton, goodbye. They got pieces there. I mean, if they want to bring him back again, they have very limited resources as far as cash goes for the moment, but I think they might throw as many resources as they can to make sure that Harbaugh is set up to go forward in the future. It sounds like they're going to be spending a lot of money just on his contract alone. It's going to be circa $20 million a year, give or take. I think that offensive line's a big piece of this. I think putting pieces around Dart's going to be a huge part here. It's going to depend on who Harbaugh brings in to be his OC. Sounded like he wanted a commitment to Monken when he was down in Baltimore. Monken might actually end up taking the job with Tampa. That's one of the OC availabilities right now that we know of. But we'll see. I know we also might have Mike McDaniel interviewing there this week as well with Tampa Bay. So maybe slow the roll on thinking Monken's necessarily going to Tampa Bay, especially now that Harbaugh is going to New York. We'll see what happens there. So let's move on. I also not a huge fan of Joe Shane, but good pieces there. We could figure out the rest as we go along. And, it sounds like a big part of Harbaugh being hired by whatever team he was going to. the caveat was he was going to have a big say in that front office, how it was going to be handled, what was going on here, who was in charge of what, bringing in his own people. I honestly think that there's some symbiotic relationships there that can work out. Shane probably shouldn't be the head of the GM room, but maybe they can move him to another part of the franchise, maybe just the lawn mowing or something. I don't know. I digress. John Harbaugh, New York Giants head coach. Sounds kind of fun. Sounds kind of beautiful. I like the deal. We'll talk more about it when we get to free agency, though. Let's talk Raiders. First overall pick. That's the good news, right? They got the number 1 overall pick. They got $88 million in cap space. That's 3rd overall in cap. Not that that's mattered. They've had a lot of cap space over the years because they're one of the teams that doesn't give out a lot of guaranteed contracts, so they can move off of guys pretty easily. They could also trade Crosby. It sounds like there's talk of trading Crosby because, not very happy there right now. They benched him towards the end of the season. Don't know if that's part of the reason why Pete Carroll got fired, or Pete Carroll was just always supposed to be a sacrificial lamb. Who knows? I don't know. I don't think drafting a running back in the top 10 was a great idea. That was just my opinion of it. But, I digress. Cutting Geno opens up $8 million. Sounds like that could be on the table here. But what pieces do they have? What are the good pieces that they got going on? Max Crosby and Brock Bowers, Colton Miller, and we don't even know if Crosby's going to be there. JPJ in a new scheme. He was looking decent last year. He fit okay in his new spot, but I think he was better as a center than he was as a guard, but I think he's an okay guard. The bad, everyone but John Gruden lasted not more than 2 years, right? Like, and I don't know, even less, to be honest, right? Pierce only had 1 year. How many was it? Okay, we have the list since John Gruden. Josh McDaniels, Antonio Pierce. Antonio Pierce was out at the end of 2025. Pete Carroll hired in 2025, and Pete Carroll fired in 2020. Yeah, so you have back-to-back 1-year head coaches. That's kind of not a good thing. You don't have a quarterback. Maybe they're drafting somebody this year, or it depends on how they feel about whoever they're drafting. If they trade for somebody, this is probably an interesting year as far as trade and free agent markets go. Do you want Tom Brady looking over your shoulder? John Spytek's over there. I'm very mixed. I'm very mixed about how I feel about this team going forward. I would probably put this as, even though you have the first overall pick, maybe my least favorite of all the spots, because there's not really something I can hang my hat on, especially if you move off of Crosby. Just because you have a cool tight end doesn't mean anything, Okay, at least Crosby gives you a really good pass rusher. If you trade him, you're admitting rebuild mode anyway. I don't know what was the point of moving off of Pete Carroll at that point. At least you get some good development out of him. Although, to be fair, I feel like the development for some of the offensive linemen took a step back. So let's move forward, shall we? Raiders get whoever's available. I think that's it, right? I think they should sign a pop singer, to be honest. I think the Raiders should sign like a pop singer to be like the figurehead head coach. I think maybe a wrestler, right? Maybe bring The Rock in. Bring The Rock in. I think that's a good idea. Have him be the head coach. Not to call plays, just be an offensive head coach. Just be kind of the figurehead there. Make some noise. Do the people's elbow, all that stuff. Or, you know what? What's his name just retired from the WWE, right? John Cena. I mean, he's also acting now, too, so he's actually, I think, a better actor than The Rock, I'm just saying. Cardinals. Let's talk Cardinals, right? They got a high pick number 3. I thought Gannon being fired was an interesting one. That was, I think of all of them, the one that I was like, well, you were in a rebuild when you hired him, and you're kind of seeing development. Okay, like clearly Kyler might not be the guy for them any longer going forward, but like you saw good play from Brissett, even like solid play from him. He had the guys playing hard. I found Gannon's firing to be one of the more concerning ones as far as and it's again another team. I think the Titans and the Raiders and the Cardinals are teams that I find less palatable as far as teams go, because I don't know what their answer is at quarterback. Are they going to keep Kyler? Sounds like Kyler's going away. Sounds like Kyler's getting traded somewhere, right? Is this another rebuild situation? The offensive line's kind of interesting, right? Left tackle Paris Johnson, center in Froholt. So they do have a couple of pieces on the O-line, but it doesn't feel like a fully complete offensive line. The receiving weapons are in a good direction, right? They have Marv Harrison, they got Michael Wilson, they got Trey McBride, so a lot of good pieces to put around somebody if you like them. They technically still have Kyler in house, but sounds like they'll be moving on. They could roll forward with Brissett and see what happens. Trade for Fields or Tua, because I don't, or maybe they feel very good about whoever wide quarterback 2 or 3 is in this draft class. Gannon was well liked as a head coach, and again went in with a rebuild and kind of I thought he did a very good job actually comparatively. I was a little shocked by that. Now, again, we'll see how that happens. They can free up some space with Dalvin Tomlinson, who didn't play well. That'd be another $10 million. So, and they're $25 million for cap space. So that's not a lot going out there, but it's nothing. It's not nothing. It's not zero, and so. I mean, like that, it's a team that I don't particularly love the team right now, but we'll see how it plays out going forward. Browns, 6th pick, Jags, and they got the Jags' first pick as well. So I'd be like in the 20s. So a lot of good defensive pieces front to back. The Denzel Ward's probably trending downwards still, but still pretty decent. So, again, they can move off of him if they want to. Maybe Ward, you could trade him away to a team that's a contender. Maybe you get some value on that asset. Even on offense, it does feel like they have some okay pieces. I imagine they bring back Tevin Jenkins. It feels like they're moving off of Teller and Conklin, the older dudes who have void years on their contracts. I don't think those guys are re-signing. They got some young dudes who looked okay, decent. Jerry Jeudy, Fannin, Tillman. They're both of the young RBs. So it's not zero. It's not nothing. Posick, do they keep him around? No idea. But the interior trio of the offensive line, Bitonio, Jenkins. Bitonio is even coming back. Is he going to retire now that a lot of his friends are gone? And they fired Stefanski. You got to learn a new scheme and everything. Probably one of the quarterbacks gets kicked. They got the 6th pick in the draft. Are they going to trade up and see, are they going to try to play Watson? That was now a new rumor. Again, they're going to try to make it work. It's like Fetch. Watson's like Fetch. It's just not going to work, kids. Still, they're still paying Watson. They're still stuck with that contract. So they're currently at negative $17 million going into the offseason. Yes, they can restructure and play around, probably Myles Garrett stuff. But I digress. They got a lot of void years. A lot of dudes they're moving off of. They're going to get younger. I think the Browns are going to be the Browns until they figure out the quarterback situation again. They lose Stefanski, guys they could probably, it sounds like the Browns are leaning towards a young dude like Udinsky, the OC for the Jags. Udinsky seems like a good pickup if they get him as a head coach, as a young dude, and they keep Jim Schwartz in-house, which sounds like is what they want to kind of do. So I'm curious by that. I kind of like that idea. I got to be honest. I like the idea of them bringing in a young dude early on and kind of saying, here, you're going to have some growing time. You're going to get some warts, but we'll roll with you. Let's go to the Ravens, right? Talked a little bit about John Harbaugh being available. Well, the team that made him available is the Baltimore Ravens. $20 million in cap, the good. They got a good, smart front office to work with. They have Lamar. The bad, they let go of a head coach who had him in the playoff hunt every year. And, you need to be able to unlock Lamar a little bit more or, figure out how to get to the next step. The question is going to be, are they going to hire an offensive head coach? They've interviewed Cliff Kingsbury. It sounds like McDaniel might be in the debate for that department as well. It looks like Kubiak was another name thrown out there. Any of those 3 guys I think would be interesting. I think a new direction for that team with an OC, an offensive-minded head coach, I think would be, good. I think that'd be fun. I like the idea of bringing in somebody who knows the X's and O on the offensive side and can kind of really scheme stuff up, because I think that's what Lamar kind of needs a little bit. Not that Monken's offenses were bad. I actually thought the offenses with Monken, I thought you saw development from Lamar that you didn't see with him under Greg Roman. So, but the ability to adapt, the ability to build off a run game that, again, I don't know if you're going to have Derrick Henry there for much longer. I mean, I'm sure they'll keep him for as long as he'll be there. But I don't know. I look at I think the question is this a desirable location? Well, I think the only one that has a legitimate quarterback. The downside is the floor has to be pretty high. Like, your floor is high because you have a quarterback. The downside is, if you don't perform, you're gonna be out of there, right? If you don't do well, you have a very you're in a situation where you have to show that you can come to work and do your job, and you probably have to be in the playoffs next year. You probably you have the stakes are high if you take the Baltimore Ravens job. That's the only downside. You don't get a mulligan year with the Ravens. I don't think. I don't know. I digress. Falcons, right? Raheem Morris gone. Terry Fontenot gone. So it's one of the I think it's one of the two GM head coach combos, but it's really the only one that was truly, they were both fired at the same time, both being hired at the same time. Falcons are an interesting team, right? Probably moving on from Kirk Cousins, right? Because he was basically the backup for most of this year. Played pretty decent at the end of the year, so he kind of recoups a little bit of his value. But he doesn't, he's not looking like the top end dude, but he's looking better. And they were definitely playing better down the stretch with Kirk than they were earlier with Penix. Penix is a guy who, even before the injury, you had concerns about, but he was showing some development. He was having some warts. He was doing fine. He was going up. He was going down. Still had the red zone conversion issues. Had the same issues I talked about going into the season last summer that, just couldn't seem to hit those tighter window throws. Was better with the downfield stuff, which, a more limited quarterback. It and now again, you're going on the third ACL injury with the guy. You have a good offensive line there. I mean, Jake Matthews is kind of old, but everybody else there is kind of young. So you kind of like the offensive line situation. Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, a lot of good things there. Can you get somebody in the building to kind of, cover losing Kirk and Penix maybe not being able to start right away with the injury and giving him time to recover from the ACL? I look at it and go like, yeah, I think you got some good things. You don't have a first-round pick this year, which is the other problem. You got to find a GM to come in with you as well if you're the head coach. It's going to be a pairing that I think is going to be an interesting one. I think they're probably going to lean offensive as well because, again, they just went defensive with Raheem Morris. They had Campbell before that, I think. Right? Was Campbell right before Raheem Morris? Was they go two defensive coaches in a row? That's weird. No, Arthur Smith was there between them. Right. So, yeah, they rotated. So now it's probably OC direction. Kevin Stefanski, probably a big discussion here. Kubiak, another one. And then, again, I think this could also be the spot McDaniel, if he doesn't go as an OC, if he goes as a head coach. Pretty good debate for him to be the head coach here. I don't know if this is the spot where they would trade for Tua. I actually don't think that this team fits Tua as much as it fits, some other dudes. Although, you never know. Drake London's still a very good wide receiver. Kyle Pitts, pending free agent, so it depends on if they want to bring him back. But having Bijan's a huge thing that helps a lot. That offensive line's going to help a lot. Kind of want to see other receivers there outside of London and Darnell Mooney to build up that room if they continue on with Mooney. I don't know what the situation is as far as, if they want to cut him or if they want to keep him around. You look at the defense. You saw some moments from the defense. Whoever's coming in is going to have to at least get that defense to be solid, which I don't think is going to be too hard. There's a reason why they spent the draft picks that they did. The pass rush was better this year than it was last year, but it's still, they don't really have an elite thing to hang their hat on that defense. Bates, good safety, but again, not having a first-round pick this year is going to, hamstring whoever's going in there as a coach, as a GM, trying to manage this team. And going forward, I think it's going to be, how do you handle next year? How do you put the block? How do you even, go into next year with, the questions you have at quarterback and the inability to really address all the issues that you probably do have? I still think it's a better situation. I would rather the Falcons over the Titans, the Raiders, and who's the other team? The Cardinals. And mainly because ownership has given guys some leeway. Raheem Morris got 2 years. Arthur Smith, I think, had 2 or 3 years. Typically an owner that has been very lenient with the people who have been there. Dan Campbell. good talent already on that team, a strength to hang your hat on with a lot of these pieces. So I like a lot of what they got. I would be interested in that job if I'm a coach that couldn't get the Giants job, couldn't get the Steelers job. I mean, even Steelers job, I don't even know if I maybe prefer the Falcons job over the Steelers job. Although, to be fair, three out of the 4 teams in the AFC North that are going to have new head coaches next year, which that has not been a thing for a long time, I'm thinking. So, like the Falcons situation a little bit, but, I mean, quarterback, at least you have a quarterback, though. At least you have an option. You have a debate when you go into next year being like, listen, we weren't able to get them all the reps at this thing, and maybe you have to bring in a guy like a Minshew or somebody, but I don't think it's the worst situation in the world. You have some options, and you have, like I said, strengths. All right. First, I'm going to talk how I order these, right? And I think Ravens obviously number 1, best job. Then it's Giants and Falcons and Steelers. You can make a debate. Any of those top 4, you can make a good debate for. I think Ravens is obviously number 1 because you have it's the only team that has a quarterback that you know is a legit good quarterback. After that, you kind of are in a weird situation there with, Giants are probably the one you think has a quarterback, right? Depends on what your feelings are with Penix as well with the Falcons. Steelers definitely don't. Dolphins, I don't know. So, Cardinals sound like they're moving off of Kyler. Raiders, they have the number 1 pick. Browns, Where do we see people landing? Arthur Smith, I'm thinking with the Titans. Definitely leaning towards the prior experience. Giants, we already know they're going with Harbaugh. There was some debate about some defensive coaches, but I felt like it was always going to be Harbaugh or Stefanski. Ravens, again, I think they're leaning towards an offensive dude. Kubiak, Cliff Kingsbury, McDaniels, maybe Flores if they're going defense. Steelers, I'm thinking Salah or Flores. Dolphins, sounds like it might be Minter or Shula. Maybe Hawley or Halsey. Again, I think a good singer could actually win it. Falcons, whoever's left of the Stefanski, Kubiak, McDaniel race. Cardinals, maybe Arthur Smith. It sounds like Raiders, Flores, maybe. Browns, Yudinski, maybe Minter. Throw in Vance Joseph as an option in one of these places. But I digress. Lastly, there's been some coordinator changeover, right? We got the Lions firing their offensive coordinator, the Commanders moving and parting ways from Cliff Kingsbury on mutual terms, as they say. Buccaneers went ahead and fired their OC, Grizzard, although I think he kind of got the short end of the stick there. I think there was a lot of injuries on that offense, but it never really kind of clicked back in when the guys came back healthy, so I think you kind of have a good argument there. Their run game kind of took a step back under Grizzard compared to compared to Liam Cohen. To be fair, Cohen's just very good at scheming up running games. I think that's just the argument there. He was very good at coaching up the screen game. So, Chargers moved off of Greg Roman. Eagles moved off of Patullo and all his problems. And now the Cowboys are looking for a new defensive coordinator, so there's that. So I think you're going to see some movement eventually on that as teams start finishing up their hires and locking up some dudes. But, yeah, who do you think is going to be the best hire for this offseason? Tell me in the comments. What team are you excited about with their head coach? Or new OC, possibly.
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous. About the past and about the future.